Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. It's finally time to take a look at the tier 6 and 7 of this new German cruiser line. Focused around manual secondaries, I've been having an absolute blast playing these things. Even in the tier 6 and 7, which notably do not have a heal. That's the big problem with this playstyle at these mid tiers. These ships don't have a heal. You're typically getting into brawls. You're trying to get spotted, trying to use these secondaries, and that means you're going to take a lot of enemy fire. So not having a heal is a massive downside. However, these ships still have very, very good secondaries, easily some of the best secondaries at their tier, and thanks to having relatively okay armor, they still can brawl. You just have to be very, very careful who you're fighting against. If the enemy ships have 380mm guns, you do not want to brawl them. I'm getting very fortunate here. This Caracciolo shot someone else, and I don't think he's going to be loaded in time before we take him out. The guns here have been downgraded yet again from the tier 8, which, reminder, got the 305s. Now we only have 283mm guns. This looks a lot like a Graf Spee, doesn't it? The tier 7 Scheer here is essentially a Graf Spee, just without a heal, adding on manual secondaries, which is a very interesting trade-off. It means you're much, much more powerful while you're still alive. Staying alive is obviously going to be the problem. The ability to swap over to manual secondaries is so much fun. These two lower tier ones also switch up the ammo type, or at least the gun caliber on these secondaries. Still HE, shouldn't have said ammo type, but 26mm of pen only on the 105mm secondaries. But you don't actually get many of them. Most of your secondaries are the 150mm guns, which still have 38mm pen. So no need to take IFHE on these anyway. The builds are quite consistent all the way up, which is really good to see. I think the big problem you're going to have, though, is trying to stay alive. So if you're thinking of grinding this line in the future, maybe some free XP bait here, I'm not sure. Worth noting, though, that these main guns are actually better than Graf Spee. Not only is the AP going to have better accuracy thanks to having battlecruiser dispersion with 2.15 sigma, where Graf Spee only gets 1.9 sigma on those main guns. We also have much better pen thanks to reduced shell drag. So interesting that we're quite a lot better outside of that heal. And now that we're battling a New York, we can see the 25mm of armor everywhere coming in very, very handy. If we bow into this New York, there's really not a whole lot you can do. You'd have to aim for my superstructure. Going broadside enough to shoot most of our secondaries here isn't too bad, although you will be wanting to wiggle back and forth. It's 47 degrees forward, 37 degrees backwards. You still get a decent amount of DPM, like 70% to 30 degrees forward, allowing you to stay in those auto bounce angles while you're fighting anything with 356mm guns and below. That's the strength here. This ship is very, very strong, assuming you're not fighting 380mm guns. That goes for the tier 6 and the tier 7 here. As soon as you fight 380s and above, you're suddenly very, very weak. So you have to be very, very careful which fights you're taking. That's what I found with both of these ships, playing the tier 6 and 7. It's incredibly powerful. Don't get me wrong. These ships are crazy, crazy strong. It's just that as soon as people overmatch you, you're going to die very, very quickly. Comparing the secondary DPM, though, if we go by hitting DPM on the ship tool website, we get like 50k hitting DPM on the tier 7. And on the tier 6 here, we get 43k hitting DPM. Still very, very good for their tiers. For example, West Virginia 44 is best at tier 7 for 53k hitting DPM. Now, it's not exactly fair to compare battleships and cruisers here, because battleships have manual secondaries, which buff things even further. This is kind of the base ship versus the base ship, but still very, very nice DPM on these two ships. And crucially, our range is massive on both of these ships relative to their tier. Admiral Scheer getting out to 9.5 base, that's the same as something like a West Virginia 44 can get out to. But with manual, it goes out to 10.3 on a tier 7. The tier 6 Deutschland here that we're playing now gets out to 9.1 with manual and 8.5 with the automated secondaries, which again is very, very insane for these low tiers. The amount of DPM, the accuracy that they have is the exact same going up through the tech tree here. I know I said it was different earlier, but that's because in testing, the tier 7 and the tier 6 here did not get manual secondaries, but instead got a heal. So massive balance changes happening right at launch. Feels a little bit odd. How can they get good data for testing if these ships are balanced if they massively change up the playstyle on us as soon as it launches? Really dislike that Wargaming does that, but they're very adamant about doing that these days, unfortunately. But it does mean you are squishier here, especially the tier 6. Not a lot of HP here, only 35k here, and this is with the heal flag on us. Without that, we're down towards 31k HP, which is not a lot for a ship that wants to be close range brawling. We still retain 25mm of armor everywhere here, though, so if we manage to fight that Fuso, we're having a good time. If we're fighting the Nagato, we're gonna die very, very quickly. We still have really good hydros here on both of these ships too. 5.5 kilometer hydros, decent amount of action time, allowing us to do some pretty disgusting damage into these destroyers. Even the tier 6, the secondary DPM is very, very high. And while I do think these two ships are harder to play than the higher tier ones with their heal, they're still really good to train you on how you should be playing these ships at higher tiers. We don't often see that. We don't always see that with tech tree lines. But I think this is actually kind of a good thing to not have a heal here, especially considering your power level compared to other tier 6 and tier 7 cruisers. They also don't have heals. They obviously don't have the armor that you have either. And while you have pretty large caliber guns, they can be a little wonky. 6-gun dispersion doesn't always agree with me. It's still a very, very strong platform here. And the playstyle at higher tier is similar, even though you can get away with a little bit more thanks to the healing, especially at 9 and 10, you have the upper belt that is very strong. The damage output from battleships and cruisers gets so extreme at high tier that you're not open water gunboating with these ships anyway. You're not open water brawling with these ships at all. So learning at low tier here to play island cover well and isolate 1v1s, farm over islands even. You can do that while dark, especially with manual secondaries. You can decide when to fire. That's the beauty of it. There's no automated system that is prevented by a tiny little rock from firing, even though you know they should be able to fire over it. I really do enjoy these ships quite a lot. And now that the event is out and available for you guys to get into, early access, of course, incredibly expensive and overpriced, in my opinion, for what you're getting, which is 2 months of early access to these things. You can get the tier 6 completely for free, though. The mission chains are going to get you up to 240 of these German tokens to get there. And the Deutschland tier 6 is available for 200 tokens. So if you want to try this out, you can completely for free. You won't get enough, though, to get the tier 7, even with the extra tokens you get from the Deutschland specific missions. So otherwise, it is going to be very expensive. And while it's a horrible thing to buy into because it's only early access, you could be getting into premium ships. Black Friday is coming up soon. At Christmas time, we have 50% off a year of premium. There's much better things to use your free doubloons on that you've been getting over the last few updates. If you get very, very lucky on the recurring bundles in this event, it is actually possible to get the Manteuffel in your first bundle. And with these, they actually show you what is in your first bundle. And that's just an obvious one that you probably should go for. Some people ask me if that's worth doing, and come on, guys. It's the tier 9 for like 1,000 doubloons or however much one bundle is. Sometimes it's 1250. Maybe I should actually check what that costs. Yeah, 1250 doubloons. If you see Manteuffel in that first bundle, yeah, I mean, you're getting free doubloons, okay? I shouldn't have to tell you guys this, but I will mention it here because I don't often mention that. It is obviously a good thing to get a tier 9 for that doubloon cost. But otherwise, I gotta say, it's better to just wait on these events. There are many, many better ways to spend money on this game. And the tier 6 does give you an interesting look at what this line is capable of. While not as powerful maybe as some of the higher tier ones, you can still do some incredibly good damage here and enjoy the fun of these manual secondaries. Having 9.1 kilometers of range at tier 6 is more than enough to have access to these secondaries, have them firing for the vast majority of the battle. Since low tiers, mid tiers like this, people tend to play at closer ranges. 9.1, remember, you typically need to get to tier 7 or even some tier 8 battleships to get that level of secondary range. So playing around islands is going to be not too difficult at these tiers. Notice how I'm not trying to round this corner until the Nagato is distracted by our Colorado. we want to focus on the Fuso, and staying angled to him is really, really important. You need to know these overmatch values. It's very tanky, assuming they don't overmatch you. That's when you can get into these brawling situations. And I really want you guys to notice, I'm going to try to finish off this Fuso. Maybe this is greed, but I'm going to try and finish off the Fuso here after firing one last salvo of my main guns, only with my secondaries, because Colorado's about to go down. Notice my detection here out at 15.8. That's my main gun's range. That's what happens when you fire your main guns. But your secondary range dictates your gun bloom, at least on the higher tier ones. Here, it is actually not able to do that stealth secondary thing. So 11.1 is what our standard detect is. And we go dark as soon as that Fuso goes down. Your secondaries don't bloom out your detection to your main gun range. So you can use that to fire your secondaries at targets. Well, maybe somebody would normally spot you in your main gun range, but you're not firing your main guns. You're firing only your secondaries. Here's a great example. Iwami, within our range, could be detecting us, but that Donskoy is not actually detecting us while firing our secondaries. I think that's really cool. Interesting tech. I mean, it's not the most useful thing in most battles, but it comes up from time to time. We're able to get some free damage in here, unspotted, simply because we're not detected by that Donskoy. If I had fired my main guns, then we would be detected, and then we'd be facing tier 9s, and it would be a disaster. Yeah, that is obviously the problem with the whole way through this line. I've been talking about that, especially with the tier 8. But the tier 7, tier 6, up tiers hurt. Certainly tier 7 into tier 9. Kind of brutal when you're trying to get into closer range without a heal. They all pretty much overmatch you at these tiers. HE is going to kill you very, very quickly as well. It's hard to play. Fortunately for us, the guns are decent at longer range. But you got to be very, very careful. You got to be very passive early on. You have to pick your moment well. And that patience is not something that I'm not always the best at, okay? You've probably seen that, especially in the ship request videos one takes any time I'm doing live recordings. Probably my biggest weakness, playing too aggressively when I shouldn't be. The other side of that coin, though, is if you wait and wait and wait, like I did in this game, I tried my best to play it passive, wait for my opportunity. Well, then you just do 0 damage. You get nothing out of your battle, and you die without accomplishing much, which also isn't very fun. These ships really would love a +1, -1 matchmaker system. I think they're doing that in World of Tanks these days. I know Boats probably doesn't have the player base to do that, but Wargaming, it would be so lovely for the vast majority of ships in the game to have +1, -1 matchmaker. Not having to worry about those double up tiers would be really, really good for the health of so many of the ships in the game. And personally, I would be willing to wait in longer queues for that. And something else that's a downgrade that I haven't quite talked about yet is our torpedoes. So we don't have the 9.5 kilometers of range that we see on the tier 8 to 10. We only get 8 kilometers of range, which is still very, very good. But we still also have a little worse damage on those two. 13,700 alpha instead of 14,400. We're still buffing that up, of course, with the secondary build. That also impacts our torpedo damage. But they are just a little bit worse. Every once in a while, the main guns just cooperate. I don't know what's going on. Sometimes I get the wonkiest dispersion ever. And then other times we get salvos like that into the poor Omaha. Poor guy. Grinding Omaha in 2025. Oh, no. Poor guy running into the new test ship. Or actually, these aren't test ships at the time that I was playing this, but running into the new hotness and getting one shot is brutal. 5.5 kilometer hydro. Also using our secondaries here, meaning we're not getting spotted. If I was using my main guns, that Mutsu probably would be spotting us, for example. It is interesting to think about situations where you can push getting damage with your secondaries while also still not being detected. I also do want to mention, relative to the higher tier ones, the secondary DPM is similar-ish to the tier 8. So while we don't have the healing of the tier 8, we don't have the range of the tier 8 on the secondaries, tier 8 at 10 kilometers gets 48k hitting DPM. Tier 7 here with Admiral Scheer, we're getting 44k hitting DPM. 38k on the Deutschland tier 6. So massive jump up when you get to tier 9, as mentioned, but it's a decent progression all the way through. I was expecting to really dislike the tier 7 and the tier 6. And while I did have my fair share of just unplayable games where I was locked out of playing, when I'm facing my own tier, these ships felt very, very good, much like the tier 8 did. So while grinding, when you get access to these ships in a couple months, it's not necessary that you should just free XP through the tier 6, tier 7, and tier 8. Certainly the tier 8 I think is worth playing, but even the tier 6 and 7 here, you can have some really, really good matches. But we all know the matchmaker, right? It's pretty brutal in those double up tiers. And now that we're back in port, I also, again, just really like that the build feels the same all the way up. The same build running on the tier 6 all the way up to the tier 10. That's not always the case of things. The only thing being Superintendent less valuable on these two. So if you're optimizing, maybe you're playing tier 7 or tier 6 ranked modes with these in the future and you have a dedicated commander, I would swap Super over to Survivability Expert. Getting that extra HP could be nice to have since, you know, 4 of these damage controls isn't too bad, at least to start with. But you definitely want the extra healing on the tiers 8, tier 9, and 10. So if you're grinding the line, yeah, definitely go Super. For some reason, it showed 4 there with Superintendent, even though Superintendent gives us 5. Some weird bugs in this game still, but Pack-a-Punch here, allowing those Torps to still do, you know, 15, nearly 16k alpha. That's really, really high. 8-kilometer Torps can be certainly a bit surprising for people at these tiers. And overall, very, very fun to play. I was surprised how much fun I had with these. Assuming the matchmaker cooperated, they're still very fun to play. 25 millimeters of armor here, auto bouncing 356 mil guns, so that's your Fusos, New Mexicos, that kind of thing. But as soon as they have 380s, so Bayern, Warspite, Nagato, all of those, Colorado, a lot of higher tier stuff, then you start to suffer a lot with that. And Deutschland actually has the same armor profile here. Just way, way, way less HP on that ship. But overall, a Graf Spee, essentially, is what you can think of this as. Although, interestingly, Graf Spee here only has a 16 mil bow, something like that, which is not great. You get overmatched by many more battleships here. Yeah, you get the heal, but it's actually a little bit better armor even yet than Graf Spee gets. So not enough to make up for lack of heal. I think healing, I would take the reduced bow armor to gain the heals. No questions asked there. But interesting that we don't get overmatched there on our bow from some of those battleships. So you can just point bow in, and they can't really do a whole lot to you, especially at these lower tiers where you're going to just have a less accurate battleship to fight. They can't pinpoint your superstructure nearly as easily. The upgrades look like this. If you don't have these mods, then yeah, damage control system, and then auxiliary or main armaments, you can go with either. Thanks to this update removing the permanent destruction of these modules, you don't have to really worry about all your secondaries being taken out. Let me know if you want to see some Schlieffen gameplay with that buff. I think it could be interesting to see what Schlieffen's capable of now that it doesn't instantly lose its Torps and all its secondaries when a Conqueror shoots at it or something like that. As for the secondaries here, you only get 2 of these 105s per side. That's why IFHE doesn't feel necessary. Also at this tier, 26 millimeters of pen on these 105. Did I say 125? 105 mil secondaries, my bad. You don't need the extra pen at these tiers. That already pens most battleships at your tier. It's really only the up tier or double up tier into 8 and 9 that would really help. And by then, you're probably not having a great game anyway, so that extra little bit on your build isn't going to make too much of a difference there. You got to hope for the same tier matches. Unfortunately, that is the way these ships are at these lower tiers, but you certainly can have some fun. And with this early access event, you can get access to the tier 6 completely for free, which is nice to see. We don't have the tier 7 as a battle pass reward. Sometimes they do that in these early access events, but you get a different tier 7 premium. Feels like they've been doing a tier 7 premium relatively consistently in the battle pass these days. 2,500 doubloons for tier 7 premium if it fits your playstyle. That's pretty cool too. Overall, the last couple updates have been amazing. 10th anniversary event has been awesome. Wargaming's doing an absolutely great job of giving us good updates for everyone, not just people willing to spend a couple $100s a month on the game, but even free to play. There's plenty of content here, so I'm absolutely loving that. I hope you guys enjoyed this look at the new line. Let me know if there's anything you'd want to see. Maybe I could do some challenges around only using the secondaries, don't even use the main guns. I mean, the tier 9 already feels like that. 6 guns, still getting the same secondary power pretty much as the tier 10. but could be some fun videos in the future. Thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day.